A Guide for Friends and Family of Survivors of Sexual Abuse, Harassment, and Assault. Published by PCAR, or Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. Someone has called it the Pennsylvania Coalition for the Advancement of Respect. I like that. We're ready for page 15. Responding to child sexual abuse. The disclosure of child sexual abuse can affect an entire family, social group, or community. If you are a caregiver or a loved one of a child who has experienced sexual abuse, you may want to seek support from your family, friends, or a licensed professional counselor. There are some support groups at local sexual assault centers also. You will be better able to support the young child if you are able to work through your own feelings about the abuse. It is common for caregivers to have a range of feelings. You might feel anger, sadness, or guilt about what has happened. These feelings may be particularly complicated or confusing if the person who harmed the child is also someone you loved and trusted. And that's most commonly the reality. It is important to remember that no one is to blame except that person or people who chose to commit the acts of abuse. Your feelings about the abuse may be different than the feelings of the child who experienced the abuse. That is okay. Reassure yourself and the child that it's typical for people to react differently, and that there are many safe ways to express those emotions and to be supportive to one another. The effects of child sexual abuse can be similar to the reactions experienced by adults. These are explained later in this guide. In children, it's common to notice changes or regressions in behaviors. For example, you might notice sleep disturbances, trouble concentrating, more outbursts, changes in school attendance or performance, or social withdrawal. Children may display behaviors that they had outgrown, such as bedwetting, thumb-sucking, or attachment to a security object. These are not reasons to be alarmed, but only normal signs sometimes that something bad happened. Just be aware if there are changes in your child's normal activities and responses. The disclosure of a child that there was sexual abuse can create a crisis within many families. Caregivers and loved ones may assume that once a child has disclosed their abuse, that they will now feel safe to return to their normal functioning. While children are very resilient and can heal from abuse, Healing can take time and patience. Gray box information. Here are a few ways you can help. Maintain consistent rules and structure to increase the child's feelings of safety. Offer choices whenever possible. This allows the child to feel a greater sense of control over their body and their surroundings. Allow the child to express the full range of emotions they are experiencing. Help them to find safe and healthy ways to express themselves. Recognize the child's strengths and help them to recognize their own resilience and strength. Most importantly, listen. Listen and believe. Listen and believe and support the child. Let them know the abuse is not their fault. Your support is more important than anything else right now. The effects of sexual harassment, abuse, and assault on any human. Each survivor of sexual violence responds in their own way. It is important to respect each person's way of coping. Whether the violence was completed or only attempted, whether it was recent or a while in the past, a survivor's daily functioning can be impacted in a variety of ways. There are emotional responses. Some survivors will openly express their emotions, while others present as if there is nothing wrong. Any responses are normal. This is typical and consistent with how the survivor generally copes with stress. Or it can come completely out of character. It may take some survivors days, weeks, months, or even years to talk about what happened to them. It is important to be patient and to remember to respect the survivor's personal processing and the timeline for coping and healing. Some physical responses. It is common for survivors to experience physical responses as a result of the trauma they have endured. Responses can include headaches, body aches, digestive issues, impact on their appetite, changes in sleep patterns, or the exacerbation of existing medical conditions. Some psychological responses. It is common for survivors to experience feelings of anxiety and depression as they process what has happened. They may develop or rely on coping strategies that help them deal with the stress. These coping mechanisms may be healthy ones or unhealthy styles. Examples of healthy coping can include exercise, journaling, art, music, or therapies. It is important to remember that coping skills that are typically considered positive can be used in harmful ways. when done to the extreme. For example, exercise is a great way to relieve stress, but when it becomes excessive, it can cause physical harm. It can cause physical harm to the survivor and social harm if the time they spend exercising is at the expense of maintaining their interpersonal relationships. Additional examples of some unhealthy coping can include using drugs or alcohol to numb the pain, sleeping excessively, over or under eating, and self-harming behaviors. Existing mental illnesses can be exacerbated, and survivors may struggle with suicidality. It is important to assist them in seeking professional help if they feel overwhelmed. Let's talk about some social responses. In the majority of cases, sexual violence is committed by someone known and trusted by the survivor. This can cause them to question their relationships with others. Many survivors will find comfort in connecting with their loved ones, but there are some survivors who will withdraw from their past relationships, current relationships. While it may seem counterintuitive, many survivors use sexual intimacy to find comfort and to gain a sense of control over their bodies. Spiritual responses to discuss. It's experiencing a trauma or life-changing event such as sexual harassment, abuse, or assault can cause survivors to question their understanding of the world. Some survivors might find comfort in faith, whether it's a religiously based faith or not, while there are others who may feel abandoned by God and faith. Experiences of sexual violence can cause people to question their sense of self, their meaning, and their own place in the world, and the reasons for suffering and pain in life. On the next page is a list of common responses. It is certainly not exhaustive. Survivors with existing physical or mental health concerns may experience flare-ups in their conditions. Often these feelings, symptoms, or behaviors will present soon after the trauma happened. But it is also possible for them to surface weeks, months, or even years after the sexual harassment, sexual abuse, or sexual assault took place. Some emotional symptoms, I guess I'll call it symptoms: guilt, shame, self-blaming, embarrassment, fear, distrust, sadness, anger, numbness, confusion, shock, disbelief, and denial. Some physical symptoms. I guess I should say responses, because symptoms sounds like it's an illness. Physical responses are headaches, stomach aches, injuries that happened during the assault, body aches, sexually transmitted infections, a pregnancy, insomnia, fatigue, and changes in appetite. Psychological responses: anxiety, depression, feeling out of control. Disassociation, difficulty concentrating. Trauma, substance use, misuse, and abuse. Phobias, thoughts of self-harm and suicidality. Social responses: withdrawal from relationships, withdrawal from enjoyable activities, avoiding certain people or places, changes in normal behavior, over-immersion in activities as an escape. People are very resilient, and healing is possible. While the healing journey is unique to each survivor, many people do find relief in talking through the trauma during counseling, therapies, or in a support circle. It is important to note that sexual assault centers are a great point of contact, and they can help identify resources within their programs or around the community that can help to meet a survivor's needs. How common is sexual harassment, abuse, and assault? The majority of sexual victimization begins early in life. This is from a study by NSVRC in 2020. According to the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, sexual violence is common in youth. Most female victims of rape, or 79.6%, experience their first rape before the age of 25. Almost half, or 42.2%, of victims experience their first rape before the age of 18 years old. Teens who experience sexual harassment, abuse, and assault, both female and male youth, are exposed to early sexual victimization. The 2015 NSVRS data found that 11 million, or 43.2% of female victims, have reported their first completed or attempted rape occurred prior to their 18th year. 1.5 million, or 51.3% of male victims, first experienced an attempted or completed rape prior to their 18th year. Male survivors. According to the 2015 NISVS, almost a quarter of men who were surveyed, or 24.8%, have experienced sexual violence involving physical contact. Rapes completed or attempted, 2.6% of men and boys. Being made to penetrate, 7.1%, or 1 in 14 men. The majority of this group, or almost 80%, reported the person who committed the abuse as a female. Sexual coercion, or being worn down by someone who repeatedly asks for sex. Sexual pressures due to someone using their influence or authority over them. And sexual coercion happens to 9.6%, or almost 1 in 10 men. Unwanted sexual contact, and this, for example, is groping. 17.9% of men have faced this. Note, since some respondents reported experiencing more than one form of victimization, the sum of these percentages is greater than 24.8%. Almost half, or 48.7%, of male victims were sexually assaulted for the first time as adults, but 51.3% of male victims of completed or attempted rapes report experiencing their first victimization prior to their 18th year. 25.3% report their first victimization occurred between the ages of 11 and 17. 26% report their first victimization at the age of 10 years old or younger. LGBTQ plus survivors. Adolescents in the LGBTQ communities are more likely to experience sexual harassment than their straight peers. Ferris et al. 2018 and Mitchell et al. 2014. Almost half of transgender adults are sexually abused or assaulted during their lives. James et al. 2016. Over 29% of lesbian or bisexual girls and over 25% of gay or bisexual boys experience a rape. Lindley and Walsman, 2015. Survivors of color. Black women have experienced an, quote, institutional pattern of rape rooted in slavery, unquote, by West and Johnson, 2013. Between 40 and 60% of Asian women in the U.S. report forms of sexual violence. Black et al., 2011. Black girls and women who are 12 years and older have experienced higher rates of rape and sexual assault than do white, Asian, and Latina girls and women. From 2005 to 2010. This is from the U.S. DOJ, Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice and Statistics, 2013. Survivors with disabilities. Women with a disability were significantly more likely to report experiencing rape, sexual violence other than rape, physical violence, stalking, psychological aggression, and control of their reproductive or sexual health. This is from the National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey of 2010. Some common questions and answers for your consideration. My friend was raped a few months ago, and since then, she has been having a lot of sex with different people, more than before. Is this normal? Each person who experiences sexual violence will respond differently, and these responses may include changes in how they express themselves sexually. Some survivors will not want to engage in intimate behaviors after experiencing sexual abuse or assault, while others find sexual activity to be a way of regaining a sense of control over their bodies and their own sexuality. For many people, sex can be a coping strategy. However, as with anything, if the sex is impacting your friend in negative ways, such as creating or compounding feelings of guilt or shame, or if they are engaging in unsafe sex by not using protection, for example, encourage your friend to reach out to a counselor and or to their healthcare provider to learn more about engaging sexual activity that is safe and healthy for their mind, body, and soul. Also, encourage your friend to seek reproductive health care. Your local sexual assault center can provide information about clinics and options. Question: my brother was sexually abused as a child. Now as an adult, he uses drugs and alcohol. Is there a connection, perhaps? Many people who misuse or abuse alcohol or drugs have experienced trauma in their past, and this can include child sexual abuse. They use substances to numb their feelings or as a form of self-coping. Self-medication. Research shows overwhelming evidence that victims of sexual violence are much more likely to use alcohol and other drugs to cope with the trauma of their victimization. The short-term relief offered by alcohol and drugs can become problematic for many survivors. If your brother is thinking about or he is in treatment for addiction, it may be helpful to encourage him to talk to someone about the abuse he experienced so that he can have help healing from his trauma and learn some different healthy coping skills. Question: my child was sexually abused by a friend of the family about a year ago. My child refuses to talk about it and is acting as if nothing happened. But I have so much anger and I can't seem to move past it. Is this common? While there are many common responses that people share, there are other responses that may be unique to that person and their situation. For example, you expressed that your child is refusing to talk about the abuse and is acting as though nothing happened. While not every child would respond in this way, it is a common reaction. It's possible that the avoidance may be a form of self-protection. It might feel easier to them not to think or talk about it. Avoidance like this can happen consciously or unconsciously. It is also entirely possible that your child is not at a stage where they understand what happened or why everyone is so upset about it. It's also common for children to not want to talk to their own parents about what happened for fear of it upsetting them. Parents often experience a full range of emotions when they learn that their baby has been harmed. These include guilt, fear, sadness, and anger. These feelings can be compounded when the person who caused the harm is someone they care about and trust. These feelings can be hard to process, especially when you are working hard to support your child. Rape crisis counselors are especially trained to support children who have been sexually abused and families who are also impacted by the abuse. You and your child might find it helpful to have a person to share your feelings and experiences with. A counselor can help you and your child explore different ways of processing and expressing feelings and help you to learn healthy coping skills. Question: I was sexually assaulted. Around that same time, I began to question my sexuality. Are these two experiences related? Social stigma of LGBTQ plus sexuality can compound the impact of sexual abuse. Whether a survivor's identity as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or straight, or any other sexual orientation, sexual abuse can and often does affect and complicate the way people feel about sex or sexuality and their gender identity. But sexual abuse itself does not turn someone gay or change someone's gender identity. No matter the gender of the person doing the harm or the one being harmed, sexual violence is about access and about vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, because of bias and discrimination against LGBTQ plus people, they are targeted for harassment, sexual abuse, and assault more frequently. For example, adolescents in the LGBTQ plus communities are more likely to experience sexual harassment than their straight peers. Ferris et al. 2018, Mitchell et al. 2014. Research finds that almost half of transgender adults are sexually abused or assaulted during their lives. James et al. 2016. Research also shows that more than 29% of lesbian or bisexual girls and more than 25% of gay or bisexual boys have experienced a rape. Lindley and Walsman, 2015. What can I do to prevent sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and sexual assault? Create safer communities for children. It is important for adults to feel confident in their ability to protect children from violence. Children are not responsible for protecting themselves, nor for avoiding sexual harassment, assault, and abuse. Parents, guardians, educators, and other adults can create safe communities for children. Sorry, my hand got tired. Adults can become comfortable talking with children in their lives about bodies, healthy relationships, and about sexuality and physical development. Use correct anatomical terms for body parts and talk to kids at different stages of their lives and development in developmentally appropriate ways. There are many great books and resources available which can offer guidance on how to have these important conversations. Contact your local rape crisis programs for more information about Parents in the Know or about healthy relationship projects or for any other suggestions. Respect when a child does not want to give or receive physical affection such as a hug, a kiss, or a high five, even when it's from a family member. Support them in their choice of whether or not to consent to physical affection with other adults. To learn more, visit safesecurekids.org. This is a website created by PCAR and Da Vinci Interactive that helps give caregivers, that helps caregivers prevent sexual abuse and harassment by communicating with children about respect and about consent. Practice action steps when another adult is acting inappropriately with a child or children around. This is something like insisting on spending time alone with them, or when they are not respecting a child's boundaries, expressed boundaries. If you are a mandated reporter and a child discloses that they have been uncomfortable or abused by someone, or if you suspect it could be happening, make the report. The phone number is 1-800-932-0313. You could also report electronically through Pennsylvania's Child Welfare Portal. Remember that it's not your role to investigate what happened. Suspicion of abuse is enough. If there's a pattern of questionable things to create a suspicion. I wonder why my fingers are cramping. If you are not a mandated reporter, you might still choose to report child abuse or suspicions of abuse. Know that support is available. If you think abuse is happening, there is support for you and for the child. Sexual assault centers can answer questions and provide resources locally. Remember that reports of suspected abuse are anonymous. Creating safer communities for everyone. Every person has the ability to promote and share respectful behaviors. This can be as simple as privately asking a friend not to make inappropriate comments, or it can be publicly intervening in an argument or conflict. Taking action steps to change the thoughts, beliefs, and norms of individuals and of communities. Sometimes it can be intimidating to disrupt disrespectful behavior. It can be hard to think of what to do or say right in the moment. You may find it helpful to plan ahead and think of some options before you're caught in a situation. Here's some examples. When a friend makes disrespectful comments about a highly publicized case of sexual assault and is expressing their victim-blaming opinions, you could share information you know about sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and sexual assault, telling them that sexual violence is always a choice made by the person who is committing the abuse, and that victims are not to blame for someone else's actions. Let the friend know that these kind of attitudes prevent people who abuse others from being held accountable. Ask compassionate and thoughtful questions about the friend's attitudes. What makes them feel that way? Maybe they never thought about it, and having a thoughtful interchange could change some of the attitudes or beliefs they hold. You could explain that sexual harassment, abuse, and assault are a serious and widespread problem, and that sexual abuse affects many people and families. Negative comments make it harder for people to come forward, make it harder to make reports, and make it harder to seek help. Tell the friend that you do not appreciate the comment and ask them to please stop. Remember, it's okay if you don't feel comfortable speaking up in the moment. You can follow up with the friend later or circle back and check with others who may have overheard it. Ask if they are feeling confused, hurt, or offended by the comments. Make sure they are all right. Sometimes these kind of actions seem like small ones, but they can have a long-reaching impact that create changes in people and communities. People who commit sexual violence often rationalize their actions with beliefs based in inequality and oppression. When we interrupt or bring attention to these kinds of attitudes and behaviors, we begin a process of change that can help end sexual violence. Encourage healthy relationships and interactions. Many of the messages we receive from the media are violent, manipulative, and harmful. And if we're in Anabaptist communities, we may not have much media. But many of us have been raised around harsh or even violent child training methods. Consider that. It's important to think carefully about the images and stories that you see and hear. This way you can challenge them and create healthier relationships and sexual experiences for yourself and others. Respectful, equitable relationships are based on consent. Consent means that both people are able to freely choose and agree to what they are going to do together by making decisions without any force or coercion. Consent should be clear, specific, voluntary, ongoing, and coherent. Silence or a lack of response is not consent. For additional information on consent or for prevention programming, contact your local rape crisis program. A list of references. Thank you for spending time with us, learning more about the responses of the body, mind, emotions, and spirit of a person following abuse or harassment, especially around children.